What happens when the owner of a 16-store chain puts on a janitor's shirt just to find out why customers keep walking out of one location? Callum Hayes never planned on running the family business. His father built the grocery chain from a single small store into 16 full-sized supermarkets across the Midwest. When his dad passed away 3 years ago, Callum stepped in, cleaned up the books, modernized operations, and tripled revenue. But lately, Store 12 in Lansing had been sending up red flags customer complaints, unusually high turnover, and a drop in sales that didn't line up with the rest of the chain. He'd never met the frontline staff there. Between layers of management and his focus on expansion, he hadn't stepped foot in that location in over a year. Every report he got from the store manager, Troy, sounded fine minor training issues, a few new hires not working out. But Callum was done relying on reports. So he shaved off his beard, dyed his hair a shade darker, added a fake scar near his eyebrow, and used a limp to throw people off. He had a new name too, Dan, a quiet guy trying to reboot his life with a warehouse job after leaving the military. The company's HR director knew the plan, but no one else. He walked into Store 12 on a cloudy Monday morning with a nervous energy he hadn't felt in years. The uniform they handed him was basic dark blue polo, khakis, steel-toed shoes. His role for the week, sanitation trainee. New guy, huh? "You're with me," said a heavily caffeinated woman in her 40s, clipboard in hand. "Sandra, head of training, don't slow me down." She didn't recognize him, no one did. And no wonder they'd never met him. Most of the store's employees had been hired in the past year. Store 12 had churned through more newcomers than any other location. "Copy that," Callum said, keeping his voice low. "First rule," Sandra snapped as they walked past the produce section, "keep your eyes open. You see a spill, you clean it. Don't wait, don't ask. Just move." They rounded the corner into aisle 10. A kid, maybe 19, was wiping up spilled orange juice on his knees with paper towels. "Tyler," Sandra barked. "What the hell did I say about using towels on spills? You mop it, or someone sues this company and we all get fired." "You want to fire me, Tyler?" "No, ma'am," the kid muttered, face red. "Then use your damn head," she snapped, grabbing the mop from the cleaning cart and shoving it into his hands. "Jesus, how hard is it?" Callum kept his face neutral, but his stomach turned. He watched Tyler's hands shake as he tried to finish the job. Later, in the break room, Callum sat beside Tyler, who avoided eye contact and picked at a smashed granola bar. "She always like that?" Callum asked. Tyler gave a half shrug. "Worse if customers are around." "Why?" "Because she says we make the company look bad," he said quietly. "She says we're the reason people leave." Callum didn't respond. He just nodded and sipped his water. Over the next few hours, Callum cleaned bathrooms, bagged trash, and shadowed Sandra. She barked orders at everyone. She snapped when people asked questions. More than once, she called new hires lazy or soft. Meanwhile, the store manager, Troy, stayed in his office, only stepping out when corporate calls came in. By the end of the day, Callum had seen enough to know something was very wrong. The store looked clean on the outside, but behind the scenes, morale was low and people were scared to mess up. That night, Callum sat in his hotel room, looking at pictures of his father on the wall. The man built this place on treating people like family. Somewhere along the line that got lost here, and now it was his job to clean it up. By the time Wednesday rolled around, Callum had memorized the store layout, the cleaning schedule, and most of the crew's faces. What he hadn't figured out was how the store was still open with morale this low. The only reason things weren't falling apart completely was because a few people held the place together with sheer effort and quiet dignity. He arrived early that morning, before the sun had fully risen, and found Brianna already restocking the dairy case. She was young, maybe 21, with long braids tucked under a hairnet and earbuds barely peeking out from under her cap. She moved fast, checking expiration dates twice and stacking cartons with precision. Her movements were automatic, focused, not a single wasted motion. You always start this early? Callum asked, keeping his tone casual. Yeah, she said without looking up. Truck comes at 5, store opens at 7. If this stuff's not out by 6:30, we get written up. You do all this by yourself, most days. Sometimes Marcus helps if he's not stuck in the freezer section. But he's been covering for 2 people since Cody quit. He nodded slowly, watching her line up the yogurt rows. She wasn't just doing her job, she was doing too, and doing it well. No complaints, no wasted time, but no one seemed to notice. Sandra passed them twice that morning, once to bark at a cashier about the wrong basket placement and another time to criticize the window cleaner for leaving streaks. She didn't say a word to Brianna, didn't even look at her work. Later, around midday, things shifted. Callum had been cleaning the loading dock area when he heard raised voices echoing through the back hallway. He followed the sound, careful not to draw attention. The door to the small break room was cracked open. Inside, Troy stood with his arms crossed while Sandra spoke to a young Latino man, Javi, one of the new hires in produce. I don't care if English isn't your first language, Sandra said, her voice sharp. You need to speak it clearly. Customers don't want to hear mumbling. This is a grocery store, not some taco truck. Callum's jaw tightened. Javi didn't say anything, just looked down at the floor. You can learn to say, "Can I help you?" without sounding like you're choking, she added. Figure it out or go somewhere that doesn't care what you sound like. Troy didn't interrupt. He didn't even blink. Callum stepped inside. Hey, sorry to interrupt, he said calmly. Javi, Marcus needs a hand in frozen. Now. Javi glanced up, unsure, but nodded and left quickly. Sandra turned to him. You don't give orders here. You're a trainee, right? Callum said, holding her gaze. Just figured he'd be more useful working than standing here getting insulted. Troy gave a tight smile. Everything under control. Callum didn't answer. He left the room. He found Javi near the freezer aisle, stacking bags of mixed vegetables. The kid's hands were shaking. You okay? Callum asked. Javi shrugged. I really try. My mom works at the other location. She said this store was hiring. I didn't think it'd be like this. You speak just fine, Callum said. Don't let anyone tell you different. Javi just nodded, eyes still down. By late afternoon, the store was short 2 cashiers and the lines were backing up. Brianna had jumped from dairy to front end without being asked. She was scanning items fast, polite to every customer despite the growing tension. Meanwhile, Sandra stood near the floral display criticizing someone's end cap arrangement. Callum watched as a woman in line grew impatient. Her toddler was crying and her cart was full. She finally stepped out of line and walked out. That made 3 walkouts in an hour. No one said a word about it. Callum grabbed a handheld scanner and stepped behind the smallest checkout lane. Don't bother, Brianna said between customers. Only managers are allowed on register. I'm not ringing anyone up, Callum said. Just scanning to see why the lines are this long. Something's off. She gave him a look but didn't push. He scanned a few items. The problem became clear fast. The scanner system hadn't been updated correctly. Sale items weren't reflecting the proper discounts, which meant cashiers were having to override nearly every other item manually. An override took time. Too much time. He spotted Troy leaning on one of the produce bins on the phone. Not troubleshooting, just watching. Back registers slow because of the system update, Callum said, approaching him. It's not syncing with the flyer pricing. Troy barely looked at him. Not my department, you're the store manager. And IT handles the pricing sync. I've already sent a ticket. When? Last week. Callum held his tongue. Barely, he returned to the floor and saw Sandra now yelling at a young woman near the baked goods for not rotating the muffins fast enough. The girl was nearly in tears. That was enough. Callum walked to the back office, opened the door without knocking, and stepped inside. Troy was at his desk, sipping a soda. Is there a reason Sandra's allowed to speak to people like that? Callum asked plainly. Troy looked up slowly. I'm sorry, who are you again? Callum closed the door behind him. I'm the guy who's been cleaning your floors for 3 days, and I've seen enough. Look, if you have a problem, take it to HR, Troy said. I run this store how I see fit. Sandra gets results. People don't like her tone. Tough, Callum stepped forward. You've got good people in this store, and they're walking out the door because of how they are treated. You've got a pricing system that's broken and no urgency to fix it. You've got one person doing the work of two, and the only thing your lead trainer does is humiliate people. All right, that's it, Troy said, standing. You're fired. Get the hell out. Callum paused, then pulled out his ID from his back pocket and dropped it on the desk. Troy froze. Callum Hayes, he said. Owner, you're done here. Troy's mouth opened slightly, then closed again. I'll deal with Sandra next, Callum said. Pack your things. I want you out of this building in 10 minutes. He left the office without waiting for a reply. Out in the store, he walked straight to where Sandra was berating a stock boy for how he folded a box. Sandra, he said, you're finished. She turned, annoyed. Excuse me, he held up his badge. You're no longer employed here. Go to the office, collect your final paperwork, and leave the building. Now. There was a pause. Then without a word she walked away. Brianna saw the whole thing, so did Javi, so did half the store. Callum turned to the stunned staff. I'm sorry you've had to work under that kind of leadership. That ends today. No one here gets to treat people like they don't matter, not in my company. He walked back toward the break room, not expecting applause, just silence. And maybe, for the first time that week, a little hope. Callum arrived at the store an hour before opening, still wearing the janitor's uniform. The early shift team was just clocking in, moving quietly through the back hallway. The tension from the day before still hung in the air, but now there was something else under it: curiosity. No one had expected what happened. Troy's office door was closed and dark. Sandra's clipboard sat untouched on the table near the schedule board. For the first time all week, it was quiet in the right ways. He walked into the break room where Brianna had just dropped her bag into a locker. She looked over, pausing. I thought you were a janitor, she said, voice flat. I am, Callum replied, then added, and I also own the place. She blinked, processing. You're the one from the photo in the lobby. With the founder's plaque. That'd be me. She leaned back against the locker, arms crossed. All right, so what now? Callum sat at the end of the bench. You've kept this place standing, I've seen it, you and a few others. I want to fix what's been broken, but I can't do it from an office in Chicago. You'll need more hands, she said. You've got one person covering baked goods and deli, one guy running produce and frozen, and half the registers are short, he nodded. I know. I'm not going to promise overnight miracles, but this store's going to get the support it should have had all along. As she grabbed her apron, she paused again. Then you'll need to start with the schedule. Marcus has been working open to close 3 days straight. He's not saying anything, but his back's locking up mid-shift. Callum stood. Where is he? Freezer section, probably trying to ignore the pain. He found Marcus kneeling beside a pallet of frozen meat, holding his side. His uniform jacket was soaked from condensation, and his breath came in uneven pulls. You all right? Callum asked. Marcus shook his head. Just pushed too hard yesterday. I thought we had another guy starting this week, but Troy kept pushing his paperwork back. Said payroll was tight. Callum crouched beside him. Payroll's not tight. That was a lie. We've been short-staffed here because of poor management, not lack of money. Marcus looked over, confused. Who are you? I'm the one who just fired your manager. Marcus slowly sat back on the crate behind him. You're the owner. Yeah. There was a pause before Marcus said, that explains the questions. Callum nodded. Go home, take today off, we'll cover your shift. I'll make sure your hours are still counted. Marcus hesitated. If I leave, Brianna's alone on 2 departments. I've already got someone from another location driving in. They'll be here before noon. Marcus gave a slow breath, stood with effort, and nodded. All right. But you better not let her drown. I won't. By mid-morning, the energy in the store had changed. The usual sharpness, the rush to avoid being yelled at was gone. Employees moved with more natural rhythm, still busy, but not bracing for verbal landmines. Callum spent the first few hours quietly observing, then pulled Brianna aside. "Need you to help onboard someone. She's from store 4, covered frozen and dairy there, solid reputation." Brianna nodded. "I can train, just don't make me lead." "Not yet. Fair." The woman arrived 20 minutes later, introduced herself as Tasha, and got to work right away. She was older than Brianna by 10 years, moved with calm confidence, and asked questions without talking down. The transition was smooth. A few regulars even noticed. One woman with 2 kids in tow whispered to Callum near the bread section, "It feels nicer in here today. Did they change managers?" "We did," he said simply. "About time." In the back hallway, Callum met with the assistant manager, a man named Darren who had been working under Troy for the last 8 months. He was tall, quiet, and hadn't said much all week. "You knew what was happening," Callum said plainly. Darren nodded. "I did." "Why didn't you intervene?" He met Callum's eyes. "I tried, once. Sandra told me to back off. Troy said I was overstepping. After that, I kept my head down and kept people from quitting when I could." "If you want to stay in this role," Callum said, "you're going to have to lead." "Not shield, not excuse. I understand. I'm giving you 1 month. Show me what this store can look like with the right guidance. If I don't see change, I bring in someone else. I won't waste it." Callum left him there, not with a handshake, but with a look that said, "Prove it." Later that afternoon, Callum stepped outside for air. The sky had turned overcast again, but the parking lot was fuller than it had been in days. Customers were lingering longer. Bags were leaving full. That meant something. He didn't get 5 steps before someone called his name his real name. "Callum Hayes." He turned to see a woman around his own age pushing a cart with a toddler in it. Her eyes were sharp with recognition. "I thought it was you. I used to work at store 9. My mom still does," he nodded. "You shopping here now?" She laughed. "I used to, then I stopped." Staff looked miserable. Shelves were half-stocked. It felt off. "Well, we're working on fixing that." She looked at him a moment. "Don't wait too long. People remember how a place makes them feel." He nodded once. "I won't." The rest of the day moved fast. Tasha took over frozen inventory without needing guidance. Brianna had breathing room for the first time in weeks. Javi volunteered to stay an extra hour to help with produce without being asked. Even the younger hires, the ones who barely spoke before, began talking in the break room again. Before closing, Callum called an impromptu meeting, not in the office, on the floor. Everyone gathered near the check stands, still in aprons, tired but curious. "I want to be clear about something," he said. "This location isn't just going to improve because a few bad people are gone. It's going to improve because each of you matter, not just the customers. You." No one interrupted. "I've spent 3 days cleaning floors and taking verbal hits that some of you have been putting up with for months. That's not leadership. That's neglect. And it stops here." One of the newer hires, a young woman with short curls and a nervous posture, raised her hand slightly. "What about the people who left, the ones who quit?" Callum paused. "If any of them want to come back, we'll talk, one by one. Some bridges can be rebuilt. Some can't." He ended the meeting without fanfare. People returned to closing tasks, but there was a new weight in the air, one that felt solid, not heavy. Accountability? Hope, maybe. A reason to stay. At the end of the night, as the last employee clocked out, Callum sat alone in the break room, still in uniform. He didn't feel proud yet, just responsible. There was a long way to go, but finally they were moving in the right direction. 3 weeks later, Callum returned to store 12, this time through the front doors, wearing his actual name badge and a button-down shirt instead of the janitor's uniform. The air still smelled faintly of citrus floor cleaner, but it felt different now. Not lighter, just more honest. The first thing he noticed was the rhythm. Employees weren't rushing, but they weren't dragging either. There was steady motion, a kind of functional quiet. It was a weekday mid-morning, usually the slowest, most disorganized stretch, but the shelves were stocked, and the front end was running without the usual tension. Callum moved through the aisles deliberately, catching small details. A handwritten sign on the bakery display thanking customers for their patience with new staff. A laminated sheet near the employee lockers showing the week's goals, with initials beside each one showing who had volunteered. He found Darren near the office, clipboard in hand, checking off a pallet delivery. "You're early," Darren said, not breaking pace. "Wanted to see how the morning builds up." Darren gave a brief nod. "Brianna's in dairy. Tasha's training 2 new hires in frozen. Javi's taking his first shift as section lead in produce." Callum watched him for a moment. "You seem steady." "Still learning," Darren said, "but I stopped waiting for someone else to fix things." That helped. They walked toward the back hallway together, past a teenaged cashier pausing to explain a receipt to an elderly customer without prompting. No eye rolls, no sighs, just quiet patience. Inside the break room, Brianna was sitting on a bench, sipping from a paper cup, eyes closed. Her apron was flecked with milk spots and her posture was slouched but not strained. "You all right?" Callum asked. She looked up, startled. "Didn't hear you come in." "You look like someone who's finally sleeping." She gave a tired grin. "Not much, but yeah. I stopped waking up dreading the early shift." Callum sat across from her, folding his hands. "You've got a review coming up. Darren's already logged your cross-training time. You've covered dairy, register, and dry goods in the past 3 weeks." "That's not nothing." "I don't want a title," she said quickly. "Not yet. You're not getting one, not unless you ask for it, but I do want your input." She leaned forward. "On what?" "Culture. We're rewriting the onboarding process for new hires. I want the first day to actually prepare people, not just bury them in policies and send them out to get yelled at." She blinked. "You're asking me." "You've lived it. No one's more qualified." She nodded slowly. "Then start with this. Don't let anyone train who doesn't want to. Just because someone's been around doesn't mean they should be leading." Callum made a note in his phone. "What else?" "Pair new hires with steady people. 1 good hour with someone who knows what they're doing is worth more than a whole binder of rules." He nodded. "That's a start." As they stood, the door opened and Javi stepped in, hair damp with sweat, apron smudged with crushed berries. "They're here," he said, breathing fast. "The group from store 15 for the workshop." Callum looked at the clock. "Already?" "Darren had me set up folding chairs in the stockroom, water pitchers, pens, all that stuff." "You're running logistics now," Javi shrugged. He asked, "I figured I could." Callum clapped him lightly on the shoulder. "Keep doing what you're doing." When they made it to the stockroom, 10 employees from another store were already seated, some with arms crossed, others scanning the space like they weren't sure what this was supposed to be. At the front, a whiteboard with the words, "Fixing what we ignored." Callum stepped up, cleared his throat. "I'm not here to give a speech," he began. "I'm here because I let a place get worse under my watch. Store 12 wasn't broken because of one person or one bad day. It broke because people stopped being listened to, and because I stopped asking questions." He paused, letting the silence settle. 3.5 weeks ago, I worked here undercover. I saw good workers crushed under bad leadership. I saw people humiliated in front of customers. I saw a manager ignore discrimination and a trainer actively drive away new hires. That's not a training issue. That's a moral failure. No one interrupted. "Those people are gone," he continued. "But that doesn't fix the damage, so starting today, we're doing something different. Every store in this chain will build a 3-person employee council rotating every quarter. 1 from the front end, 1 from stocking, 1 from support. They'll report directly to me. No filters, no edits. Real-time feedback." One of the visiting employees, a middle-aged man with thick glasses, raised a hand. "Is this just for show, or are you actually going to implement what they say?" Callum didn't hesitate. "We've already changed 5 policies based on what people here suggested. One of them, Brianna, rewrote our entire onboarding approach. It launches across all stores next month." Another hand went up. A younger woman, maybe 20, spoke next. "What about the managers who protect toxic leads? Are they being coached or replaced? They're being evaluated by teams other than their own. And yes, some are being replaced. Feedback is being cross-verified anonymously. No more blind loyalty to tenure. Javi stepped forward, holding a stack of printed forms. These are the new assessment checklists. They're not for grading employees, they're for grading us. Leadership, training, support. He handed them out, one per person. After the workshop, Callum stayed behind to help fold chairs. Tasha joined him, wiping her hands with a towel. "You're not what I expected," she said. "Good or bad, just different. Most owners don't stick around once the cameras are off." "No cameras here," she nodded. "That's why I said it." He looked around the cleaned-up stockroom. "You think we're making a dent?" "Not yet," she said. "But you're swinging the hammer in the right place." That night, Callum sat alone in the store office long after the last shift clocked out. He reviewed the day's notes, feedback from the workshop, Brianna's ideas, Javi's logistics plan. He pulled up the store 12 performance metrics. Customer satisfaction scores were up 14%. Employee turnover had dropped by almost half in the past 3 weeks, but numbers weren't the real story. It was the way Marcus had returned after a week off, standing taller. The way Brianna had spoken with authority without asking permission. The way Javi took initiative without fear of stepping on toes. The way no one flinched when a question was asked. He stared at the founder's photo on the far wall. His father, arms crossed, standing in front of the first store, a man who believed in earning trust, not demanding it. Callum leaned back in the chair. This wasn't a rescue story, it was a repair. And it wasn't finished, but it was finally honest. He shut off the light and locked the door behind him. The aisles were dark, shelves quiet. But tomorrow they'd open again with people who knew they mattered.